I didn't know the man I was begging owned the entire city. The rain hit my face in cold, sharp needles as I stumbled across the empty street, my sneakers soaked through, each step heavier than the last, my arms trembling from the weight of my daughter pressed against my chest, her small body burning with fever, her breath shallow and uneven against my neck. "Stay with me, Lily, please, baby, stay with me," I whispered, my voice cracking as I pushed forward, the hospital doors behind me still glowing under fluorescent light, still closed, still refusing us. "No insurance, ma'am. We're sorry." The words echoed in my head like a sentence I couldn't escape, like a verdict already decided, and I couldn't afford to stop, couldn't afford to think, because her fingers were losing their grip on my jacket, her tiny hand slipping like she was already letting go. And I wasn't ready, I couldn't be ready, not like this, not in the middle of a street that smelled like rain and asphalt and broken chances. I reached the curb just as headlights cut through the storm, long and black and silent, a convoy of SUVs gliding toward me like something out of another world, too clean, too precise, too powerful to belong in my reality. And I didn't think, I couldn't think, I just stepped forward, right into their path, raising one shaking hand while holding Lily tighter with the other. "Please." My voice tore out of me before I could stop it, raw and desperate and louder than I knew I could be. The tires screeched softly as the first SUV came to a stop just feet away, water splashing around my legs, and for a second everything went still, like the city itself was holding its breath. Doors opened, not rushed, not chaotic, but controlled, deliberate, men in dark suits stepping out one by one, their movements calm in a way that made my chest tighten, like they weren't afraid of anything. Like nothing could touch them. One of them raised a hand slightly, as if signaling me to move, to step back, but I couldn't, I wouldn't, not when Lily's breath hitched again, not when her head rolled weakly against my shoulder. "Please save my daughter," I said again, softer this time, my voice breaking under the weight of everything I was about to lose. And then he stepped out, not from the first car, but from the second, like he didn't need to be first to be in control, tall, composed, dressed in a perfectly tailored black coat that didn't seem to belong to the same storm I was drowning in, his presence cutting through the chaos like silence after a scream, and I felt it before I even looked at him, that shift in the air, that quiet power that made the other men step back just slightly, just enough to tell me who he was without anyone saying a word. My eyes lifted, meeting his, and for a second I forgot how to breathe, not because he was kind, not because he looked gentle, but because there was something in his gaze that saw everything at once, the rain, the fear, the child in my arms, and judged it in a heartbeat. "She's not breathing, right?" I said quickly, the words tumbling over each other as I took a step closer, ignoring the subtle tension from the men around him. "I don't have money, I don't have anything, I just, please." My voice dropped to a whisper, the last piece of me breaking free. "Just save her." And then something changed, not loud, not obvious, just a flicker, a pause in his expression so brief I almost missed it. His eyes dropping from mine to Lily's face, lingering there for 1 second longer than necessary, like he recognized something he wasn't expecting, like something in him had just been pulled awake. And when he spoke, his voice was low, controlled but absolute. "Get her inside," he said, and suddenly everything moved, fast, precise, the men around him stepping forward not to push me away, but to guide, to open doors, to make space, and I didn't understand what was happening, didn't understand who he was or why they were listening to him like that. All I knew was that for the first time that night, someone had said yes, and as I followed them toward the waiting car, still holding Lily like she was my entire world, I realized, with a strange, terrifying certainty, that whatever I had just stepped into, there was no walking away from it. I did not remember getting into the car, only the way the world blurred into streaks of red brake lights and rain across tinted glass, the way my arms refused to let go of Lily even when someone gently told me, "We need space to help her." And I shook my head, clutching her closer like if I loosened my grip even a little she would disappear. "I am not letting go," I whispered, my voice hoarse, and then a different voice cut through everything, calm and low and impossible to ignore. "She stays with her," he said. And just like that, no one argued, the door slammed shut. And the car moved, smooth and fast, the kind of speed that did not feel reckless, just inevitable, like the road itself was clearing for him. I could feel it in the silence, in the way the men around us did not speak unless necessary, in the way the driver never hesitated. I shifted Lily slightly, brushing damp strands of hair from her forehead, her skin still too hot, her breathing too uneven, each inhale catching like it had to fight its way out. "Stay with me," I murmured again, pressing my cheek against her temple, counting every breath because I was afraid to miss one. Across from me, he sat perfectly still, one hand resting on his knee, the other holding a phone he had not looked at since we started moving. His eyes were not on me, not exactly, but I could feel them, tracking, calculating, noticing everything. "How long has she been like this?" he asked, his voice steady, not unkind but not soft either. I swallowed, trying to steady my own voice. "Since this afternoon it got worse fast. I tried urgent care but they said to go to the hospital, and then the hospital said I needed insurance or a deposit and My words fell apart under the weight of it, under the memory of being turned away, of standing there with a child in my arms and being told to wait like time was not running out. He did not interrupt, did not react the way people usually did when they heard something like that. No sympathy, no pity, just silence, like he was filing the information somewhere deeper. "What is her name?" he asked after a second, and I blinked, surprised by the question. "Lily," I said quickly. "Lily Carter, she is 6. The car slowed, then turned sharply, and when I looked up, we were not pulling back into the same hospital. This entrance was different, private, quieter, glass doors already opening before we even stopped, people waiting, doctors, nurses, all standing ready like they had been expecting us, like this moment had been scheduled instead of desperate. The door opened and hands reached in, careful but efficient. "We are taking her now," someone said, and this time I hesitated, my arms tightening instinctively, panic rising again. "No, please, I need to stay with her," I said quickly, but again that voice, his voice, cut through everything. "You are coming," he said, already stepping out, already moving, and I followed because there was no other option, because somehow he had turned my chaos into direction, into something that felt like control. They placed Lily onto a gurney and rushed her through the doors, machines already being prepared, voices overlapping in calm urgency, and I stumbled after them, my legs unsteady, my heart somewhere between my throat and my chest, until a hand lightly caught my arm, stopping me just long enough to make me look up. He stood there, close now, closer than before, his expression unreadable but his eyes sharper than ever, fixed not on me, but on the hallway where Lily had just disappeared. "She will be treated," he said quietly, not a promise, not reassurance, just a statement, like something that had already been decided. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something shift inside me, not relief, not yet, but the fragile, terrifying possibility that my daughter might actually make it. And I did not know who this man was or why the world seemed to bend around him, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I had just placed my entire life into his hands, and he had not hesitated to take it. Time stopped the moment the doors closed behind Lily and the sound of her gurney wheels disappeared down the hallway, leaving me standing there with empty arms that still felt like they were holding her. My fingers curled slightly, like I could still feel the warmth of her skin. I did not realize I was shaking until I looked down and saw it. Small tremors running through my hands that I could not control. "Ma'am, please sit," someone said gently beside me, but I barely heard them, my eyes fixed on the red light above the double doors, on the place where she had vanished, because if I looked away it would mean accepting that I could not follow her, that I had to wait, and waiting felt like the worst kind of helpless. "She is in good hands." The voice came again, closer this time, steadier, and I turned just enough to see him standing there, exactly where I had left him, like he had not moved at all, like everything else had moved around him instead. "How do you know that?" I asked before I could stop myself, my voice raw, almost accusing, because I needed something to hold on to, something real. His gaze shifted from the doors to me, calm, unreadable. "Because they will not fail," he said simply, and there was something in the way he said it that made it sound less like confidence and more like a rule the world obeyed. I swallowed, my chest tightening again. "I cannot pay for this," I said quickly, the words spilling out like they had been waiting. "I do not have insurance, I work 2 jobs, I barely make rent, I will figure something out, but I just need time." I hated how small my voice sounded, how desperate, but it was the truth, the only thing I had left to offer. He did not respond right away, his eyes studying me for a second longer than necessary, like he was measuring something I could not see. Then he stepped past me, slow, deliberate, pulling a phone from his pocket as he did. "Everything is covered," he said without looking back, and just like that, it was decided, no negotiation, no discussion, just another thing that bent under his will. I stared at him, my mind struggling to catch up. "You cannot just..." I started, but stopped when he raised his hand slightly, not to silence me, just enough to pause the moment. "Focus on your daughter," he said, his tone still calm, still controlled but firmer now, and I felt it, that subtle shift from option to instruction. I turned back to the doors, my heart pulling me there again. But something in me hesitated, something that did Not quite trust how easily everything had changed, how quickly my problem had become his decision. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time did not feel real anymore, just stretched and uneven. Nurses moved in and out, voices low, controlled, no panic, no chaos, just efficiency, like this place operated on a different set of rules than the one I had been turned away from earlier. And every so often I felt it again, his presence behind me, not hovering, not intrusive, just there, constant, watching. The same doors I was, as if whatever was happening on the other side mattered to him more than it should. "Who are you?" I finally asked, the question slipping out before I could filter it, because nothing about this made sense, because people like him did not just stop for strangers in the rain, did not rearrange entire systems for a child they did not know. He did not answer immediately, and for a second I thought he would ignore it, but then he spoke, quiet, almost distant. "Someone who does. Not like losing things that matter." The words settled between us, heavy in a way I could not explain. And I turned to look at him again, really look this time at the sharp lines of his face, the stillness in his posture, the control in every breath he took, and something about it made my chest tighten for a completely different reason. Not fear exactly, not anymore, something closer to realization, because the way he was watching those doors, the way his jaw tightened just slightly when a doctor walked past without stopping, the way his eyes flicked toward every movement inside that hallway. It was not detached, it was not casual, it was personal, and I did not understand why, but I could feel it. Whatever was happening behind those doors was not just about my daughter anymore. And that was the moment I realized this was no longer just a rescue. It was the beginning of something I had not asked for, and did not yet understand. The silence stretched so long it started to feel loud, pressing against my ears until every small sound became unbearable. The distant hum of machines, the soft footsteps of nurses passing by, the quiet murmur of voices behind closed doors, all of it, blending into a constant reminder that I was not in control, that I was waiting for someone else to decide what happened to my daughter, and I hated it. I hated how powerless I felt standing there with nothing to do but breathe and hope, my arms crossed tightly over my chest like I could hold myself together if I just stayed still enough. "Miss Carter?" A voice called gently, and my head snapped up so fast it made me dizzy. A doctor stood in front of me now, mask lowered, eyes tired but focused, and for a second I could not speak, could not even breathe, because everything inside me was bracing for something I was not sure I could survive. "She is stable," he said, and the words hit me slower than they should have, like my mind needed a moment to understand them. Stable, not worse, not gone, stable. My knees almost gave out right there. A breath leaving my body in a broken sound I did not recognize as my own. "She had a severe infection that escalated quickly, but we have her on treatment now," she responded. "Well," he continued, his voice steady, clinical, but to me it sounded like something else entirely, like a second chance I did not deserve but was being handed anyway. "Can I see her?" I asked immediately, my voice barely holding together, and he nodded. "In a few minutes we are moving her to a private room." Private room, the words felt foreign, out of place in my life, and I knew exactly why it was happening. I turned instinctively, my eyes finding him again. Still standing where he had been, still watching everything unfold like he had expected this outcome all along. The doctor followed my glance, just briefly, and something in his posture shifted, a subtle straightening, a careful choice of words. "She will receive the best care available," he added, and I knew that was not meant for me, not entirely. The doctor left as quickly as he had arrived, and I stood there for a moment longer, letting the reality settle in. Lily was alive, she was breathing, she was still here. And I should have felt relief, pure and simple, but it was tangled with something else now, something heavier, something I could not name yet. I walked toward him slowly, my steps uncertain, like I was approaching something I did not fully understand. "Thank you," I said when I reached him, the words too small for what he had done, too simple for something that had just saved my entire world. He looked at me then, really looked this time, his expression unchanged but his eyes sharper, more focused, like he was searching for something beneath my words. "She is not out of danger yet," he said quietly, not dismissing my gratitude, just grounding it, and I nodded quickly. No, I would not have made it here without you," I admitted, the truth settling heavily between us, because without him, I would still be standing in the rain, still begging doors that would not open. His gaze lingered on me for a second longer, then shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, like something had caught his attention. "How long have you been in this city?" he asked suddenly, the question unexpected, cutting through the moment in a way that made my chest tighten again. "All my life," I answered automatically, confused. "Why?" He did not respond right away, his jaw tightening just slightly, his eyes drifting past me for a fraction of a second before returning. Controlled again, unreadable again, no reason, he said, but I knew that was not true. I could feel it, the same way I had felt that pause earlier when he first looked at Lily. Something was not adding up, something about us, about her, had caught his attention in a way that went beyond coincidence, and as a nurse approached to guide me toward Lily's room, I felt it settle deep in my chest, that quiet, growing certainty that whatever connection had started tonight was not accidental, and whatever he had seen when he looked at my daughter, he had not looked away since. The hallway felt different as I followed the nurse, quieter, softer, like the world had shifted into something I did not recognize, my footsteps echoing faintly against polished floors that looked too clean, too perfect for someone like me to be walking through. She is right in here, the nurse said gently, pushing open a door that led into a private room filled with low light and steady machine sounds, and there she was, Lily, lying still against crisp white sheets that made her look even smaller than she already was, tubes and wires carefully placed, nothing frightening, just enough to remind me how close I had come to losing her. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped closer, my hand instinctively reaching out to touch her arm. Warm, still warm. Hi, baby, I whispered, my voice breaking into something softer than I had felt all night. Her eyelashes fluttered slightly, not fully awake, but there, still fighting. Still here. I pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast the moment would disappear, my fingers brushing lightly over her hair, smoothing it back the way I had done 1,000 times before. And for the first time since the rain, since the street, since everything fell apart, I let myself breathe, really breathe, the kind that fills your lungs and reminds you that you are still alive too. You scared me, I murmured, leaning closer, resting my forehead gently against the edge of the bed, closing my eyes for just a second, just long enough to feel the weight of it all settle, the fear, the exhaustion, the relief. But even in that quiet moment I felt it again, that presence, not inside the room but just outside it, steady, unmoving, like something that had not left since it arrived. I turned my head slightly, glancing toward the glass panel beside the door, and there he was, not entering, not interrupting, just standing there watching, his posture unchanged, his expression unreadable, but his eyes fixed on Lily in a way that made my chest tighten. Not out of fear this time, but something else, something I could not explain. I straightened slowly, my hand still resting on Lily's arm as I held his gaze through the glass, and for a moment, neither of us moved. It was strange how silent it felt, how intense something so still could be, like there were questions being asked without words, like something deeper was unfolding that I had not been invited to understand yet. The door opened quietly behind me and I turned as the nurse stepped in to check the monitors, adjusting something with careful precision. She is responding well, she said softly, glancing at the screen. We will keep her here overnight for observation, but she is strong. I nodded quickly, my throat tightening again. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than I had ever meant anything. The nurse smiled gently and left, the door closing behind her with a soft click, and when I looked back toward the glass, he was still there, still watching, like he had nowhere else to be. Like this moment mattered more than anything else waiting for him outside these walls. I stood up slowly, my legs still unsteady but stronger than before, and walked toward the door, hesitating for just a second before opening it, stepping out into the hallway where he stood, closer now, the distance between us smaller but somehow heavier. You do not have to stay, I said quietly, not because I wanted him to leave, but because I needed to understand why he had not. His gaze shifted from the room to me, steady, focused, and for a second I thought he would give me another simple answer, another controlled response, but instead, he looked back at Lily through the glass just for a moment before speaking. Some things are not meant to be left alone, he said, his voice lower now, almost distant, like he was speaking more to himself than to me, and something in those words settled deep in my chest, something that felt less like coincidence and more like the beginning of a truth I was not ready to face, because the way he was looking at my daughter, it was not the way a stranger looks at a child he helped. It was the way someone looks at something they had already lost once and never expected to see again. The hallway felt quieter now, but not empty, not with him still standing there like he belonged in every space he chose to occupy, like the world adjusted itself around his presence without question. I leaned lightly against the wall beside the glass, my eyes drifting back to Lily, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, counting each breath like it still mattered, like I could protect her just by being close. She is going to be okay, I said softly, more to myself than to him, but he heard it anyway. Of course he did, his gaze still fixed inside the room, his posture unchanged, controlled, deliberate. She is strong, he replied, his voice low, certain, and there was something in the way he said it that made it sound like he already knew her, like strength was not something he was guessing, but something he had recognized. I turned my head slightly, studying him again, trying to understand what I was missing. You talk like you know her, I said carefully, watching for any reaction, any shift, but he did not give much, just the smallest pause before his eyes flicked toward me, then back to Lily. I know what survival looks like, he said, and the answer felt incomplete, like a piece of a larger truth he was choosing not to share. Silence settled between us again, but it was different now, heavier, filled with unspoken questions that neither of us seemed ready to ask directly. I pushed myself off the wall slowly, crossing my arms as I faced him more fully. People do not just stop their cars in the middle of the street. For strangers, I said, my voice steady but quiet. They do not take over entire hospital floors either, so I am trying to understand why you did. This time he looked at me longer, his expression still calm but his eyes sharper, like he was deciding how much to reveal or whether to reveal anything at all. You stepped in front of my car, he said finally, his tone even, almost matter of fact. Most people move out of the way. I let out a breath that almost sounded like a small laugh, shaking my head slightly. I did not have a choice, I said, my voice softening again as I glanced back at Lily. She is my only family. The words hung there for a second, heavier than I expected, and something shifted in his expression, not obvious, not dramatic, just a subtle tightening around his eyes, a flicker of something that passed too quickly to fully catch. Only family, he repeated quietly, almost like he was testing the words. Then his gaze returned to Lily again, lingering longer. This time, and I saw it clearly now, that same pause, that same almost imperceptible reaction he had when he first saw her. Like something about her did not belong in the present, like she carried a piece of something from his past. What is it? I asked, the question coming out before I could stop it, sharper than I intended. You keep looking at her like you are seeing something I am not. He did not answer right away, and for a moment I thought he would ignore it again, dismiss it like the last question, but instead he stepped closer to the glass, just slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied Lily's face with a level of focus that made my chest tighten. She has a mark, he said quietly, and my breath caught instantly, my hand instinctively pressing against my own wrist where Lily had the same small crescent-shaped birthmark just above it, something I had memorized from the day she was born. A birthmark, he continued, his voice controlled but lower now, more distant, left side, near the wrist. I felt a chill run through me that had nothing to do with the cold air in the hallway, because he had not been close enough to see that earlier, not clearly, not like this. A lot of kids have birthmarks, I said quickly, too quickly, my voice tightening without permission, trying to dismiss something that suddenly felt too important, too dangerous to acknowledge, but he did not look at me, did not argue, just kept his eyes on her, steady, unblinking. Not like that one, he said, and there was something in his tone now, something heavier, something that felt less like observation and more like recognition, and in that moment, standing there between the quiet hallway and the room where my daughter slept, I felt it settle deep in my chest, that this night had not just brought him into our lives by accident, it had uncovered something that had been waiting long before I ever stepped into the rain, something that connected him to her in a way I was only just beginning to understand, and whatever it was not going to let any of us walk away unchanged. The air between us shifted the moment he said it, like something invisible had just been pulled into the light, something neither of us could pretend not to see anymore. My arms tightened instinctively across my chest, my fingers pressing into my sleeves as if that could ground me. It is just a birthmark, I said. Again, quieter this time but firmer, trying to reclaim control of a moment that was slipping too far beyond me. But he did not respond, did not argue, and somehow that silence felt heavier than if he had, because it meant he was certain in a way I was not prepared to challenge. I turned away first, breaking the tension, stepping back into the room where Lily lay, the soft beeping of the monitor wrapping around me like something familiar, something I could understand. I moved to her side quickly, sitting down and reaching for her hand, needing that connection, needing something real that belonged to me. You are okay? I whispered, more for myself now, my thumb brushing gently over her wrist, over the small crescent mark I had seen 1,000 times without thinking twice, until tonight, until now. A quiet knock came at the door before it opened, and a nurse stepped inside with a polite smile, checking the monitors with practiced ease. Her fever is coming down, she said softly, adjusting a line with careful precision. That is a very good sign. I nodded quickly, relief washing through me again. But it did not settle the way it should have, not completely, not with the weight of his words still sitting in the back of my mind. Can she wake up soon? I asked, my voice lower now, cautious. The nurse glanced at Lily, then back at me. She might drift in and out for a while, but her body is responding well. She is fighting. Fighting, the word echoed differently now. Heavier, layered with meaning I had not questioned before. The nurse finished her checks and left, the door closing softly behind her. And I knew without turning that he was still there. I could feel it, that same steady presence that did not fade, did not step back like he had anchored himself to this moment. I exhaled slowly, gathering what little composure I had left before standing again, my legs steadier this time as I stepped back into the hallway, closing the door halfway behind me. Not fully, never fully. I looked at him, really looked this time, not just at the surface, but at the way he held himself, the way his gaze never drifted far from that room, the way everything about him felt controlled except for that one fracture I had just seen. You recognized it, I said quietly, not a question anymore, just a truth I was starting to accept. His eyes met mine, steady, unreadable, but there was no denial in them, not this time. I have seen it before, he said, his voice lower than before, more distant, like he was speaking from somewhere far behind the present, a place I did not have access to. My chest tightened again, my mind racing through possibilities I did not want to consider. On who? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, because something about the answer already felt like it would change everything. He held my gaze for a long second, the silence stretching just enough to make my pulse quicken. Then he looked past me, back through the glass at Lily, his expression tightening just slightly, controlled but not untouched. Someone who should not be connected to her, he said finally. And the words settled like something cold and unmovable, something that did not fit into the life I had built, into the story I thought I understood. I felt my breath catch, my thoughts stumbling over themselves, trying to make sense of something that refused to be simple. That does not make any sense, I said quickly, shaking my head, because it could not, it should not. He did not argue, did not explain, just stood there with that same quiet certainty, like the truth did not need to be defended, only accepted. And for the first time since this night began, fear returned, not the kind that came from losing Lily, but something deeper, something slower, the kind that grows when you realize the past you thought was gone might still be reaching into your present. And as I glanced back at the room where my daughter lay sleeping, I understood one thing with absolute clarity, whatever he had just recognized. It was not something either of us could ignore anymore. The words stayed with me longer than they should have, echoing in the quiet space between us like something unfinished, something waiting to be understood. And I could not shake the feeling that I had just stepped into a story that had started long before I ever knew it existed. I glanced back into the room again, watching Lily sleep, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm now, peaceful in a way that made everything else feel distant for just a second, but not enough to erase what he had said, not enough to silence the questions building in my mind. You cannot just say something like that and leave it there, I said finally, turning back to him, my voice low but steady, because I needed answers, because this was my daughter and whatever connection he thought he saw, it involved her, it involved us. His gaze met mine again, calm, controlled, but there was something different now, something less guarded, like he had already crossed a line he could not step back from. Some truths are not simple, he said, and I felt frustration rise instantly, sharp and immediate. Neither is this situation, I replied, my arms crossing again as I held his gaze, refusing to let him retreat into vague answers. You said she is connected to someone from your past. That is not something I can ignore. The silence that followed stretched longer this time, heavier, and I could see it in the way his jaw tightened slightly, the way his eyes shifted just briefly toward the door before returning to me, like he was measuring something, weighing a decision that did not come easily. There was someone, he said slowly, his voice quieter now, less controlled, more distant, like each word carried weight he had not intended to share. A long time ago. I held my breath without realizing it, every part of me focused on what he was about to say next. She had the same mark, he continued, and something in my chest dropped, not because of what it meant, but because of how certain he sounded, how final it felt. That does not mean anything, I said quickly, the words coming out faster than I could filter them, because the alternative felt too big, too impossible to accept. A lot of people can have similar marks. He did not argue, did not push back, but his silence spoke louder than anything else, his certainty unchanged, his gaze steady, like he had already gone through this argument in his own mind and come out the other side. Who was she? I asked, my voice softer now, not as defensive, more cautious, because something in me needed to understand the weight behind his reaction, needed to know why this mattered so much. He looked at me for a long second, then past me again toward Lily, and when he spoke, his voice carried something new, something I had not heard before, not control, not authority, but something closer to memory. Someone I failed to protect, he said, and the words settled heavily between us, shifting something in the air that I could not quite name. I felt my breath catch again, the tension in my chest tightening in a different way now, not just confusion but something deeper, something more complicated, because this was no longer just about recognition, it was about regret, about something unresolved. And you think that has something to do with Lily? I said slowly, trying to piece together something that still did not fully make sense. He did not answer right away, but this time when he looked back at me there was no distance in his gaze, no hesitation, just quiet certainty. I think she is the reason I stopped tonight, he said, and the simplicity of it hit harder than anything else he had said so far, because it was not an explanation, it was a truth, something he had already accepted. And as I stood there, caught between the quiet room where my daughter slept and the man who had just stepped into our lives like something inevitable, I realized that whatever connection he believed existed, whatever past he thought had found its way back to him through her, it was not something he was going to walk away from, and whether I understood it or not, neither was I. His words did not leave me, they settled somewhere deep, heavy and unmoving, like a truth I had not agreed to but could not ignore, and the more I stood there, the more I felt it spreading into everything, into the quiet hum of the hallway, into the soft light spilling from Lily's room, into the way I could no longer look at her without wondering what I had missed all these years. You think she is the reason you stopped? I repeated slowly, trying to understand something that refused to fit into logic, my voice softer now, less defensive but still searching, still holding on to what I knew. But that does not explain how she could be connected to someone from your past. He did not interrupt, did not correct me, just listened in that same still way, like he had already considered every question I was about to ask. I raised her. I continued, my chest tightening as I spoke, because this part was real, this part was mine. I was there when she was born, I have been there every day since. There is no one else, no hidden story, no missing pieces. I paused, swallowing hard as the words settled between us, daring him to challenge them, but he did not directly. His gaze shifted again, back to Lily, like that was where the answer was, not in anything I could say. Sometimes the past does not ask for permission before it returns, he said quietly, and something in that sentence made my stomach tighten, because it did not sound like a theory. It sounded like experience, like something he had already lived through. I shook my head slightly, trying to push back against the feeling creeping in. That still does not make this possible, I insisted, but my voice was not as strong as before, not as certain, because doubt had already found its way in, and I could feel it growing, slow and steady. I turned away from him again, stepping back into the room, needing distance, needing to look at Lily without his presence shaping what I saw. I moved closer to the bed, my fingers brushing lightly over her hand again, tracing the small crescent mark on her wrist, the same mark I had kissed absent-mindedly 100 times without thinking twice, and now it felt different, like it held a meaning I had never questioned before. You are mine, I whispered under my breath, not out of possession but out of reassurance, like I needed to say it to believe it, like I needed to anchor her to me in a way nothing could take away. A soft sound pulled my attention back, and I froze for a second before leaning closer. Lily's eyes fluttered again, slower this time, more deliberate, her breathing steady but heavier, like she was pushing her way back to the surface. Mom, she whispered faintly, her voice fragile but real, and everything inside me broke open at once, relief flooding through me so fast it almost hurt. I am right here, I said quickly, leaning closer, my hand tightening gently around hers. You are safe, everything is okay. Her eyes opened just enough to find me, unfocused but searching, and then something else caught her attention, her gaze drifting past me toward the doorway, and I felt it immediately, that shift, that same presence she had never noticed before. I turned slowly, already knowing what I would see. He was there, just outside the door, not stepping in, not moving closer, just watching, the same way he had been all along, silent, controlled, but present in a way that could not be ignored. Lily's small fingers tightened weakly around mine, her eyes still fixed in that direction. Who is that? She whispered, her voice barely audible, and for the first time since this night began, I did not have an answer, not a simple one, not one that made sense, because standing there just beyond the edge of the room was not just the man who had saved her life, He was something else now, something tied to her in a way I was only beginning to understand, and as I looked between them, between my daughter and the man who could not seem to look away from her, I realized that whatever truth was coming, it was not going to wait much longer. Her voice was barely there, just a fragile thread pulling me back from everything else, but it was enough to remind me what mattered most. I leaned closer instantly, brushing my fingers gently through her hair, keeping my other hand wrapped around hers like I could anchor her to this moment. "Hey, you are okay?" I whispered softly, forcing calm into my voice even though my heart was still racing. Her eyes blinked slowly, trying to focus, drifting between me and the doorway again like she was trying to understand something her body was too tired to process. "Mom," she murmured again, a little clearer this time, and I felt my chest tighten with relief. "I am right here," I said, nodding gently. "I am not going anywhere." Her grip on my hand tightened just slightly, weak but real, and I held on to that feeling like it was everything because it was. For a moment I almost forgot he was there, almost, until Lily's gaze shifted again, more deliberate this time, her small voice barely above a whisper. "He is still there," she said, and I froze, my breath catching in my chest as I slowly turned my head toward the doorway. He had not moved, not even a step, still standing just outside, not crossing the line into the room but not leaving either, like he understood that space mattered. But distance did not change anything. I turned back to Lily quickly, forcing a small smile onto my face. "It is okay," I said gently. "He helped us get here." Her eyes stayed on him for another second, studying him in a way that felt too aware for a 6-year-old, too quiet, too observant. Then slowly, her gaze returned to me, but her fingers tightened again around mine. "He feels familiar," she whispered, the words soft but clear enough to send a chill through me that I could not ignore. My heart skipped, just for a second, because that was not something I could explain away, not something I could brush off as confusion or fever. Children did not say things like that without meaning something deeper. I forced a gentle shake of my head, trying to keep my voice steady. "You are just tired," I said softly, brushing her hair back again. "You have been through a lot tonight." But even as I said it, I knew it did not fully settle, not for me, not anymore. Her eyes drifted closed again, her body relaxing back into the bed, exhaustion pulling her under once more, her breathing steady, calm, and I stayed there for a second longer, watching her, making sure she was still here, still safe, before I slowly stood, my legs moving before my thoughts could catch up. I stepped out into the hallway again, closing the door gently behind me, the quiet space wrapping around us once more, and I faced him, really faced him this time, no hesitation left, no distance to hide behind. "She said you feel familiar," I said quietly, my voice steady but heavy with everything I was starting to understand. His expression did not change, not visibly, but his eyes shifted slightly, something deeper moving beneath the surface, something he was no longer fully hiding. "Children notice things adults ignore," he said, his voice calm but softer now, less guarded. I exhaled slowly, crossing my arms again, not out of defense this time but to hold myself together. "Then stop speaking in pieces," I said, my tone firmer than before, because I could not keep standing in the middle of something half explained. "If there is something connecting you to her, I need to know what it is." The silence that followed felt different, not avoidance, not deflection, but decision, like something had finally reached the point where it could not be held back anymore. He looked at me, really looked this time, and for the first time since I met him, there was no distance left in his gaze, no barrier, just something real, something heavy, something undeniable. "The woman I failed," he said slowly, each word deliberate. "She was not just someone from my past." My breath caught instantly, my mind already racing ahead of what he had not said yet, my chest tightening as I waited, every part of me bracing for something I knew would change everything. And when he spoke again, his voice was quieter but stronger, like a truth he had carried for too long. "She was my wife." And in that moment everything shifted, because whatever connection I had tried to deny before, it was no longer something I could pretend did not exist. The words did not just land, they broke something open inside me, something I had been holding together without realizing it. My breath caught so sharply it almost hurt, like my body had forgotten how to process what I had just heard. "Your wife?" I repeated slowly, the phrase unfamiliar in a way that made it heavier, more real, because it was not just a past connection anymore. It was something deeper, something permanent. I searched his face for any sign of hesitation, any indication that he might take it back, soften it, explain it away, but there was none, just that same steady certainty, that same quiet weight behind his eyes. "And you think my daughter is connected to her?" I said, my voice barely holding steady now because saying it out loud made it impossible to ignore, made it real in a way I could not control. He did not answer immediately, but his silence was no longer avoidance, it was confirmation, and that was worse, much worse. I shook my head slowly, stepping back without realizing it, my arms crossing tighter around myself as if I could shield myself from what this meant. That does not make sense, I said again, but the words felt weaker now, thinner, like they could not hold against the weight of everything else. She is 6 years old. I have raised her on my own. There has never been anyone else. No one who could. I stopped, the thought catching before I could finish it, because I did not even know what I was trying to prove anymore. He watched me carefully, not interrupting, not pushing, just letting the reality settle in its own way. What was her name? I asked suddenly, the question slipping out before I could stop it, because if there was a connection, if there was even a possibility, I needed something concrete, something I could hold on to. His gaze shifted slightly, not away, but inward, like he was reaching back into something he did not often revisit. Isabella, he said quietly, and the name lingered in the air between us, soft but heavy, like it carried its own history, its own weight. I swallowed hard, repeating it silently in my mind, Isabella, trying to place it somewhere, trying to find any memory, any link, but there was nothing, just a growing sense of unease. I do not know anyone by that name, I said, my voice lower now, more uncertain because the absence of recognition did not feel like relief, it felt like something missing, something I should have known. His eyes returned to me, steady, searching, like he was measuring my reaction, looking for something specific, something that would confirm or deny whatever he was thinking. She disappeared years ago, he continued, his voice still calm but carrying something deeper now, something closer to truth than anything he had said before. No trace, no explanation. My chest tightened again, the pieces shifting in ways I could not follow. And you think somehow that connects to Lily? I said more quietly now because I was no longer arguing, I was trying to understand, trying to find the edges of something that felt too large. He exhaled slowly, the first real sign of anything breaking through his control, just a small release but enough to notice. I think the night I lost her did not end the way I was told it did, he said, and the words settled into something cold and undeniable, something that reached beyond coincidence, beyond simple explanation. I felt my breath catch again, my mind racing through possibilities I did not want to consider, because if he was right, if there was even a fraction of truth in what he was saying, then everything I believed about my daughter's past, about my own life, might not be complete, might not be whole. I glanced back toward the room, toward Lily, still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm building just outside her door, and for the first time since I held her in my arms, I felt something else layered beneath my love, beneath my relief, something quieter, more uncertain. The realization that the life I thought I understood might not be the full story at all. The silence after his words did not feel empty, it felt full, like the space between us was holding something too heavy to move, and I could not tell if I was standing at the edge of the truth or the beginning of something I would never fully understand. My eyes drifted back to the room again, to Lily, still resting peacefully as if none of this existed, as if her world was still simple, still untouched. And I wanted to keep it that way, I needed to keep it that way. Even if what you are saying is true, I began slowly, my voice steadier than I felt because I had to anchor myself to something, to anything that still made sense. She is my daughter. The words came out stronger now, clearer, not defensive but certain, because that part of my life was not a question. It was not something that could be rewritten by a past I never lived. He did not interrupt, but his gaze shifted slightly, watching me in a way that felt more focused now, more deliberate, like he was listening for something deeper than just the words. I was there when she was born, I continued, my chest tightening with each memory, each moment I had held on to without ever questioning. I named her, I raised her, I stayed when no one else did, so whatever connection you think exists, it does not change that. The statement settled between us, firm and unmovable, and for a moment I thought that might be enough, that it might draw a line between whatever he believed and what I knew to be true. But instead something shifted in his expression, not disagreement, not resistance, but something quieter, something almost like understanding. I am not trying to take that away from you, he said, his voice lower now, less controlled, more human, and that alone caught me off guard, because it was the first time he had spoken without that layer of distance, without that unbreakable edge. Then what are you trying to do? I asked, my voice softer now, not because I trusted him, but because I needed to understand where this was going. His eyes moved past me again, back to Lily, lingering there for a moment longer than before. And when he spoke again, the words came slower, more deliberate, like each one mattered. I am trying to understand why the past I buried is standing in front of me again, he said, and something about that sentence made my chest tighten in a different way, because it was not about control, not about power, it was about something unresolved, something unfinished. I exhaled slowly, turning slightly so I could see both him and Lily at the same time, caught between two worlds that did not belong together but were somehow colliding anyway. And if you find an answer, I said carefully, my voice barely above a whisper now, what happens then? The question hung in the air longer than I expected, heavier, because I was not sure I wanted to hear the answer, not sure I was ready for whatever came next. He did not respond immediately, his gaze steady, thoughtful, like he was considering something he had not allowed himself to consider before, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried that same quiet certainty that had followed him since the moment I stepped in front of his car. Then I make sure she is never put in danger again, he said. And the words should have felt reassuring, they should have sounded like protection, like something I would be grateful for, but instead they settled into something more complicated, something heavier, because it was not just a promise, it was a decision, one that did not ask for permission. I felt my breath catch again, my arms tightening instinctively as I looked at him, really looked this time, at the man who had already changed everything in a single night. She is not part of your world, I said quietly, the words more fragile than I wanted them to be, because I could feel how easily that line could disappear, how easily his world could reach into mine. He held my gaze without hesitation, without doubt, and for the first time, there was no distance left between what he was thinking and what he was willing to say. She already is, he replied, and the simplicity of it made it impossible to argue, impossible to deny, because whether I accepted it or not, he had stepped into our lives in a way that could not be undone. And as I stood there, caught between the life I had built and the truth that was slowly unraveling it, I realized something I had not been ready to admit before. This was no longer just about saving my daughter, it was about what came after, about the world she had just been pulled into, and whether I liked it or not, we were already too deep to turn back. The words lingered long after he said them, not loud, not forceful, just certain, and somehow that made them harder to ignore. I stood there for a moment without speaking, feeling the weight of everything settle into place, not neatly, not comfortably, but in a way that could not be undone. Then I turned back toward the room, toward the one thing that had always been clear in my life, Lily. I stepped inside quietly, closing the door behind me just enough to soften the world outside. The machines continued their steady rhythm, calm and consistent, like a reminder that something was still stable, still safe. I moved closer to her bed, sitting down again, my hand finding hers without thinking. Her fingers curled slightly around mine even in her sleep, that small familiar gesture grounding me in a way nothing else could. You are still mine, I whispered softly, not as a claim against anyone else but as a promise to her, to myself, to the life I had built one day at a time without knowing anything about the shadows that might have been waiting behind it. Her breathing stayed even, her face relaxed, untouched by the tension that filled the space outside this room. And for a moment I let myself stay there, just watching her, just being her mother. Because that was the only role I understood, the only truth I trusted completely. But even in that quiet I could feel it, the shift that had already begun, the line that had already been crossed, the world that had already found its way in. I glanced toward the door again, knowing he was still there without needing to see him, that constant presence that did not fade, did not retreat, and I realized something then, something I had been resisting all night. This was not a moment that would pass, not a coincidence that would fade with time, it was a beginning. Whether I wanted it to be or not, I leaned forward slightly, pressing a gentle kiss against Lily's forehead, her skin cooler now, healthier, and I let out a slow breath, steadying myself for what came next, because pretending nothing had changed was no longer an option. I stood up again, my movements slower, more deliberate this time, and walked back toward the door, opening it just enough to step out into the hallway where he waited, exactly where I expected him to be, like he had not moved at all. Like he had been standing there through every thought, every realization, every quiet moment I had just lived through. I looked at him, not with fear, not with confusion, but with something steadier, something clearer, because I understood now that this was not something I could avoid. If you are right, I said quietly, my voice calm but firm. If there is something connecting her to your past, then we find the truth, but we do it my way. The words surprised even me, but they felt right, they felt necessary. Because this was still my life, my daughter, my responsibility. His gaze held mine, steady, assessing. But there was no resistance in it, no immediate rejection, just consideration, and that alone told me more than anything else. "And your way is?" he asked, his voice low, controlled, but open in a way it had not been before. I took a slow breath, grounding myself in the one thing I knew for certain. "She comes first," I said without hesitation. "Not your past, not your answers, not whatever you think you lost, her." The word hung between us, clear and unshakable. His eyes shifted slightly, not away but deeper, like he was measuring the weight of what I had just said. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he nodded, not in agreement. Not fully, but in acknowledgement, like he understood the line I had drawn and chose not to cross it, at least not now. "Then we start there," he said quietly, and something in his voice had changed, something less distant, less controlled, like this was no longer just about him, just about the past, but about something unfolding in the present, something that included both of us whether we were ready or not. I glanced back once more at the room where Lily slept, safe for now, unaware of the truth waiting just outside her door, and I felt it settle deep in my chest, that quiet, undeniable shift, because I had walked into that hospital alone, desperate and out of options, and now I was standing here with a man who could change everything, and whether I trusted him or not did not matter as much as it should have, because one thing was already clear: he had stepped into our lives to save her, but what came after that was going to change all of us.